let's talk about the number one reason why your renovation project is going to fail and you're going to end up losing money. Recent studies show that over 80% of renovation projects end up failing to meet the budget, the timeline, and the vision for what the investor had in mind. The reason for that is one simple mistake that happens before any hammer even gets swung. So in today's video, we're going to show you is a simple planning process that can make sure that your projects come in on time and on budget every single time. Let's get into it.
Hey guys, let's talk first about project scope and design. The very first thing you're going to want to do is develop a preliminary design for your project. And this is going to be based on looking and doing some research on the market comps or comparables. You want to see what things are going for in your market. What are people expecting in your market? And it's important at this time when you see Tyrone to not do any over improvements or under improvements, because either way, it's going to hurt your ability to get your return on investment.
Exactly. You don't want to create any variables that could detract from giving the market exactly what it wants. That's the importance of looking at those rent comps. If you're going to be renting the property out, deciding who your type of your tenant, your ideal tenant is going to be. You're flipping the property, you're looking for that end buyer and what they are looking for. So when you're looking at these comps and determining the level of renovation that you need to do to come right in where those comps are, you want to look at things like finishes, amenities, different things that are done on the projects to make sure that you're coming right in line with that. This is not where you want to reinvent the wheel. Unless you have a substantial amount of experience and you are looking to create your own trend or put your own sort of hallmark on the properties that you're renovating, that would be a different scenario. But again, that's for experienced flippers and renovators. Sometimes folks start out and they decide, well, that's what the comps look like, but I think if I do it this way, people like it more. And you end up renovating a property according to what you like and not according to what the profit or to what the market has demanded and has shown that they are willing to pay money for. And that's when you see properties sit on the market sometimes and you wonder, what's wrong with this one?
And in addition to finishes, it could even be finishes and amenities. It could also be features too. Like you might notice that the things that are renting or the things that are selling are all this many bedrooms or this many bathrooms, or they have this room included in that. So you might need to take on project might require a larger scope of work, which would require you to create those spaces in those rooms that the market is demanding.
And ideally, you would have done that work prior to taking on this project, because you should already know and have your financials targeted for exactly what you're going to do with this property. So that would have tied it in the scope of renovation, whether or not you're adding a bedroom, or you're adding a bathroom, you're going to finish the basement, or you're going to do a lot of landscaping outside to match, comparables, the comps. So that stuff you should have determined prior to this. But if you haven't, this is exactly where you want to dial that in.
And I'm just going to explain a little bit more on the under or over improving. So under improving, so not doing what the market is demanding and doing less quality work, essentially, that is going to make it hard to rent or sell at your target price. Over improvements mean that you're not going to see the return on that investment. You're going to put more money into the project than you're going to get back on the project. So you really want to be right in line with those market trends.
So let's give a couple of examples of what could be under improvements or over improvements. Say, for instance, the comps have granite countertops and you decide you just want to do the hard surface, sort of rental grade countertops that you can get at Home Depot or Lowe's just because it's cheaper. But you think it's the same.
Yeah, you're going to justify it in your mind. You say, well, it looks the same. Yeah. Nobody will know.
It doesn't look the same. And you're looking at bathrooms and you're comping against properties that have nicely tiled shower surrounds and other things built in like that. And you think you're going to go buy a one size, quick thin, like a bath fitter type deal. That's going to be a fiberglass unit. And you think, well, it looks the same. It's white. This one's white tile. That one's a white. It's not the same. Over improvements. Maybe you want to put in crown molding because it looks really, really nice. It looks really, really nice, but all else is the same. That's probably an over improvement in some units, especially if it's going to be a rental. If it's not a higher end flip, crown molding a lot of times is very expensive because of wood. These days it is pretty expensive. And that is something that you can spend thousands and thousands of dollars on, but it's not going to really raise that above the comps.
Yeah. Or maybe you really like hardwood flooring and you think like, oh, well, of course a renter or of course person who's buying this property is going to like the hardwood flooring. But you might be in a market where there's just not a demand for that, and people don't have the income to justify the price for that hardwood floor.
Again, so this is all about matching what the market has demanded. All right, so just keep that in mind. And this is also a good place to pull in someone who to help you with this. If this is your first time and you're having trouble really deciding what should be included in your project because you haven't designed a flip or a rental before, or maybe it's a new market for you, this is when it'd be good to talk to experienced realtors, realtors who are also investors. Should I say real estate agents, who are also investors, or designers. If you have those people in your network, those are great books to work with to get these things balanced.
Next, once you have an idea of the features, the amenities, and the finishes that you're going to need for the property, you're going to want to create a detailed project summary. And that's by going from room to room and literally listing out everything that needs to be done in every room. And this can be a little painstaking depending on the scope of the project, but it needs to be as detailed as possible because everything's going to cost you money. So you want to make sure you have each line item that, is it new windows? Is it new window sills? Is it new trim? All of those things going to be accounted for.
This is going to be a tedious process, and it's one where folks often start to skip listing the same things when you go to different rooms. But the reason why you don't want to skip being extremely detailed is because you're starting to develop a scope of work. And one of the things that we often see is miscommunication between the project owner and the contractors that ends up leading to a lot of money being lost by cost overruns. So contractor missing that you wanted this thing also done in this room, right? And you might think, well, of course I want it done in that room. I did it in all the other rooms, but something simple as not actually reviewing it and going through it room by room actually leads to a lot of miscommunication, a lot of headaches, and leads to a lot of additional expenses when you have to call a contractor back out to do something or have them rip something back out to install something that should have been there. This is we're already in the risk mitigation here by being extremely detailed. So you don't want to skip this step.
And you want each line item accounted for. You want to know how much that all adds up to. So yeah, in addition to making sure everybody's on the same page and not having any miscommunication, you want to make sure everything has been accounted for financially.
And we have personally seen this on projects where the contractors quote you one price and they were leaving out something that was either spoken and not explicitly written in the scope that was given to them, but it was spoken and it was assumed, well, of course I wanted it in all the bedrooms, right? And they quoted you a price according to this. And if you go through all the process and you get down to signing a contract and you're going live based on this one price, and then you have to come back and then it becomes a change order and it becomes this, and it creates contention between you and the contractor. Again, we say detail room by room because this is based on real life experience and it happens every day.
And this will ultimately essentially become a punch list for you as well as you're managing the overall project for you to make sure everything has been done to your specifications.
Yeah, this is the initial sort of phase of the punch list. You're going to really hone it and it's going to come together as you and the contractor develop the finalized scope of work. But this is, again, setting the basis for that.
Next, you're going to kind of figure out, based on that, you can be able to figure out what your project needs and who needs to be implemented into the project to fulfill those needs.
Yeah. So this is when you're going to take a look at, if there's really three main areas that you want to consider. Okay. The first one is going to be how the project will be managed. So are you going to bring in a general contractor who's then going to engage all the other parties to manage the project? Or are you going to be the general contractor? If this is within your wheelhouse, you have contractor experience and you're doing you're flipping this project yourself, then you might be the GC actually hiring all the subs. That's the first major decision that has to be made. Okay. Who do I have to engage to bring into the table for this project? And if it's depending on which way you're going between those two, it's going to lead to developing that assessment of who needs to be at the table. The second one is going to be
Who those people are.
Yeah. Deciding does the project involve major structural renovation? Okay. Are you going to require an architect? Okay. Are you going to require a structural engineer? Okay. If you don't know exactly, if you're just starting out, is one of your first deals and you haven't been through this process before, then you can start to lean on, contractors as you talk to the contractors that you're considering for the project that will help guide you along this process. But these are some of the boxes that you want to check. You do need an architect, engineer, the GC, as we just talked about, and then what other trades are you going to need to engage to get work done? As it does involve electrical, plumbing, HVAC, everything else. Does a roof need to be replaced? Landscaping, masonry. So this is when you're going to make that list of all these different parties that you may need to engage and determine what their involvement will be, which is number 3. Okay, so you're expecting certain contractors within that realm to work in certain areas. Okay, you're basically just drawing sort of a matrix of, okay, this is who I need and this is what they're here for, right? And this is, again, just helping you develop that full scope of work in a very methodical and systematic way so that you can keep track of everything.
Yeah. Okay. So now that you have your initial design or your preliminary design, you have a detailed list of what is going to be done by area. You've identified who is going to need to be involved in the project and to what extent. Now it's time to start creating that timeline. How long is this project going to take? So starting with your start date, when are you going to be able, or when do you want to get everybody in there to start working on the project?
The preliminary timeline is something that you're going to need initially because this is going to begin a very important piece of the communication between you and the contractors that you're on to work to engage. But also understanding that if this is one of your first deals and you're not experienced with renovations at all, you may not know how long any of this is going to take. So from that standpoint, the very first place you have to start is knowing when you're looking to start. Okay, if you have to line up financing for this, or is it, do you have the financing in place? Are you funding this? How are you funding the renovation? If all that stuff is already sorted out, then you have an idea of when you could kick this project off. And then that's going to be an effective piece of the communication, because as you talk to contractors, one thing you will learn is that they're not just waiting around for new jobs to come in. A lot of times, especially in this market, they are booked, and the good contractors are booked. If you approach contractors and they're waiting and they have nothing going on, that is a red flag. So you want to get into their schedule and be able to place that. And it gets complicated a little bit when you're dealing with several contractors, right? So again, that timeline, setting that and understanding, at least I need to get it started, within the next 3 to 4 months, and I need to be done before that same time next year. Something is that you can use to communicate around. You're going to want to start with at least a baseline.
Yeah. And just now, in case you don't have any experience with any contracting projects, but just also knowing that certain phases of the project need to be completed before other phases can start. So you need to make sure you're getting everybody in at the right time frame, essentially, like when they're supposed to be doing their jobs. The next subcontractor can do their job.
Yeah, and we're going to talk more about that in a later video when we get into the phase of work and how we stage that. Again, as we talk about talking with your realtor before, or your real estate agent, this also might be a place where they can help you with that timeline. If you're flipping this project, especially you're going to list it on the market, that might start to govern, the barriers for when you're trying to be finished this project. So if you want to get started as soon as possible and you want to list before winter, that's a defined set of time. So you want to say 8 months to get this project done so it can be on the market. So that's where you start to think about these things.
Most agents work on trying to get you in on the spring market. So just be mindful of that if that's possible. But like Tyrone said, there's definitely certain times throughout the year that are less ideal to list. So
Yeah. Another one is if you're funding this, say it was private money or hard money, especially if you have some kind of bridge loan in place, or you're going after a bridge loan, and depending on the color of that money and the requirements of that loan, you might have those things dialed in. It's going to be a 6-month bridge, going to be a 9-month bridge, a 12-month bridge, whatever it is. This is when it needs to be done by. So that is going to be the last one that you're going to really want to hone in on to ramp out the initial scope and design.
we'll see you on the next one.